Welcome back. It's an old Will Rogers line. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Well, for the White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, that first impression was, to be polite, horrible. In an angry statement in the briefing room Saturday, Spicer lashed out at the news media, but his tirade included a number of statements that just simply weren't true.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe.
The boss liked it. Then Trump counselor Kellyanne Conway took this leap.
Answer the question of why the president asked the White House press secretary to come out in front of the podium for the first time and utter a falsehood. Why did he do that? It undermines the credibility of the entire White House press office on day one.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that.
The one thing he got right was Zeke Miller. 4 of the 5 facts he uttered were just not true. Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
Alternative facts. I don't want to be overly dramatic about this, actually, to borrow a phrase there, because I think sometimes we get a little silly when we worry about ourselves and how the president and his team interacts with the news media. But the idea that you can, when you are the president or you speak for the president and you're standing in the White House, which is owned by the taxpayers, speak alternative facts, meaning deliberately say things that you know not to be true, that gets dangerous. Crowd size, who cares? We'll be behind this. That will be behind us in a few days. But what if it's about policy? What if it's about foreign relations? Can Iran suddenly come forward with alternative facts about its nuclear program?
Well, and I think that's one of the things that reporters, White House reporters, Hill reporters, any reporter, it's not abnormal to have an adversarial relationship with your sources. We all deal with that. We do our jobs. It's fine. Some days are better than others. But I do think it's a question of, Sean Spicer is now supposed to be the bridge between the government that the people have elected and the free press, which shares with the American people what this government is doing. And so there is a certain level of honesty the American people have to be able to get from the person in that role. And you're right, it doesn't really matter when it comes to crowd size, but it does matter when we're talking about a terrorist attack. It does matter when we're talking about moving American ships. It does matter when we're talking about a number of these other issues that are going to be imperative in the coming years. And I think that is what's concerning about this.
And it's worth pointing out that he is now in a position where the American people are paying his salary. Right. It is not the Trump campaign. It is not the RNC. And I actually thought the single most unsettling, chilling part of the entire performance was after he spews out essentially a fire hose of misinformation. He says, and this is what you should be reporting and covering. And for someone in his first outing at that lectern to stand there in a society with a free press and a government official ordering them what to be reporting and covering it's just so far beyond any norm.
Yeah, and we all know Sean. He's not new here. Let's just say he was told to say that, and we know that from reporting to be true. He doesn't. I don't think he personally believes in that, but he took this job, and his credibility is at stake here. This is all part. Let's listen to the president himself. The president over the weekend went to CIA headquarters, and as part of his speech there, he discussed what he calls his running war with people like us.
As you know, I have a running war with the media. They are among the most dishonest human beings on earth. What? And they sort of made it sound like I had a feud with the intelligence community. And I just want to let you know, the reason you're number one stop, it is exactly the opposite.
Now, of course, that's not true. That's not true. He started the fight with the intelligence community with his words and his tweets, including at one point saying, they're like Nazi Germany. We live in Nazi Germany, that they were leaking on him. But let's leave that aside for a little bit. We did learn in the campaign, if Donald Trump disagrees with you or if he thinks you are a threat to him, like his opponents, he tries to undermine you. Is that what he's doing here? Yeah. Just trying, essentially, if you don't hear it from me, it's not true?
It's, they're trying to tarnish the credibility of the news media because as any president experiences, most of the press is negative press. You get pretty hostile as Sarah said, adversarial relationship with the press corps that does investigate, that does report on things that you are not doing, that you promised on the campaign trail, things that are conflicts of interest, et cetera. And Trump has had his fair share of bad press. So if he can say that everything that we're saying is not accurate, then perhaps what he's saying, then no one will listen to us and will listen to him. That's what they hope, at least. And he needs an enemy, and we're the enemy.
And he's also fully aware that the press isn't exactly in great standing with the American people. But the
neither
fact
is-
is, we can't worry about our popularity.
Right.
But neither is he. And that's what all of this is about. From everything he signed today to everything he said over the weekend, it's designed to shore up his base of support, because pretty soon that may be all he has. He went into the presidency last week with a rating no bigger than the 40s, the worst rating of any new president in modern history. If he starts to lose that even more, it's going to be very difficult for him to get anything done in the next few weeks and months. So he went after us because, you know, we're just as unpopular as Congress these days, frankly, and that's fine. We'll continue doing our jobs. He's got to do his, which means throwing us under a bus.
One thing I will say in their defense, which is a difficult thing to say after that Sean Spicer briefing over the weekend and all of its falsehoods, look, today they do have their reporters at the White House. They are letting them in for sprays at the top of his meetings with business leaders to see the executive orders. That part is encouraging. This is still the people's house, and the press should still be let in to broadcast to the American people at least a part of what he's doing in the White House. That part is encouraging. We'll see what else.
And it's a feeling out process, shall we say. Early on, we'll see how this goes. There were so many fascinating moments over the weekend in the early days of the new administration. One of them was the president had a reception for first responders and law enforcement. Among those there, the FBI director. You might remember his fight with the intelligence community started over these reports that the intelligence community, including the FBI director, had presented him with this dossier of alleged Russian compromat, as they call it, compromising information. So James Comey, the FBI director, is in the room, and Donald Trump decides he wants to greet him.
Oh, and there's James. Will you please? He's become more famous than me.
What makes this moment rather delicious is the Democrats, of course, are furious at James Comey for how he handled the Clinton email investigation during the campaign. But we also know that the FBI is, as we speak, investigating possible contacts between Trump associates and the Russian government during the campaign. And so here you have the FBI director getting called out by the President of the United States, whose associates are under investigation.
I don't think Comey liked that, probably. It undermined his credibility among the liberals and Democrats who don't believe he has any credibility left. And it really reminds folks of the Bill Clinton meeting with Loretta Lynch on the tarmac in the middle of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. So I'm sure people will point back to this moment if they don't like the results of this investigation.
And there's a question about whether Comey stays even.
Right.
But
there
he
was
wants
some
to stay
dispute
permanent.
about who was hugging who there. I think it was pretty clear the president was pulling in the director.
It's a fun early days here in this new one. Up next, a big week for Team Trump on Capitol Hill, beginning with today's debate about whether the new president is trying to bring back waterboarding.